Thank you for allowing me to speak at this Horizons seminar on digital disruption. In Australia, when we think about the digital, we are probably likely to hear comments such as everyone has a mobile phone, everyone has a smartphone, everyone is on Facebook. Statements like that are probably quite common in Australia. So I thought it was important for us to think about the context in our Pacific neighbouring countries where things aren't quite like that. And of course we know that even in Australia not everyone is on Facebook and so on, but the context is very different in our nearest neighbours. Sean Dorney, a correspondent who was in Papua New Guinea for a long time and covering the Pacific, recently wrote a book in which he argued in a quite compelling manner for why we should pay some attention to the Pacific and Papua New Guinea in the case of that book in particular. They're our nearest neighbours, and it's important, I think, for us to think about the Pacific. So in the Pacific Island countries, including many parts of Papua New Guinea, which is the most populated country, there are a lot of people that don't even have electricity, running water in their homes, access to toilets. So to think about the digital disruption, I think it's important to think about the fact that many people are living in those kind of conditions, and to not forget that when we talk about what's happening in the world in 2016. So for instance, in a village where I've spent time in Madang province in Papua New Guinea, many of the families don't have a toilet, they don't have electricity, they don't have running water and so on. They do now have mobile phone coverage though, and it is a disruption which is making a difference in their lives. And I was fortunate that I was able to conduct research in the earliest days of mobile phone adoption in the rural areas of Papua New Guinea, and the field research was conducted in 2009, and at that time the people were telling me that they were just delighted to be able to speak to their friends and their loved ones living in other parts of the country. For example, people that had moved away for marriage or for studies or for work. So being able to communicate with people living far away was something that people were delighted about, and this was really a big change in their lives. On the other hand though, many of those places still only have 2G or second generation network coverage, which means that it's not adequate to be able to use social media and access the internet and emails on phones and so on. It's very difficult still. Even if people had the phones, many people still only have basic phones. So I think when we talk about digital disruption in 2016, we do need to remember that many people in the Pacific and in other developing countries around the world don't have necessarily access to the internet and the kinds of devices and software that we're talking about. Even so, digital disruption is occurring, and there is some positive difference that's being made through the use of technology. I'll just give you one example. For example, this project that I worked on in Papua New Guinea called SMS Story. SMS Story was a project in which we sent text messages, daily text messages to teachers at village schools in rural and remote parts of Papua New Guinea. The text messages contained a story and a lesson plan, and we found a statistically significant improvement in the reading ability of students whose teachers received those text messages compared to the students whose teachers did not receive the text messages. So there are some really positive things that can be done with technology and some interesting disruptions taking place. For example, at the moment in Papua New Guinea there's much discussion on Facebook, for those people that are on Facebook in Papua New Guinea, about what's going on with the current student protests against the Prime Minister not going ahead with allowing himself to be arrested and investigated. So there are some really interesting things taking place, as long as we also remember that there are many people in the world who still don't necessarily have access to the full benefits of the digital through not having access to the electricity, the money to be able to use these things and so on. So thanks very much for allowing me to speak, and I'm sorry I couldn't be at the seminar.